Hidden deep within the fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls lies a text that few were ever meant to see, a record so unsettling that it was concealed for centuries. This is the Book of Giants, a writing that tells of angelic rebellion, forbidden unions, and the birth of monstrous beings who reshape the earth in terror. To encounter it is to step into a world where heaven and earth collided, where divine order was broken, and where mankind suffered under the weight of corruption too great to bear. The very discovery of this book sparks questions that stir the imagination. Why was it hidden away? Why was it considered too dangerous for ordinary eyes? And what truths does it reveal about humanity's earliest struggles with forces far beyond its strength? The silence of centuries seems to suggest that its contents carried a weight that could unsettle faith itself, exposing a side of history that was deliberately shielded from the world. Yet here, in the fragments that remain, we are invited to look upon a forgotten reality, one that explains why the flood came, why judgment fell, and why humanity was never meant to walk blindly through its past. The Book of Giants does not speak softly. It describes a time when angelic beings, once radiant in the courts of heaven, descended in rebellion and took for themselves the daughters of men. From this union came offspring of terrifying size and strength, giants whose hunger could not be satisfied, whose violence spread across the earth like wildfire. They were not simple men of great stature, but distortions of creation, living reminders of what happens when divine boundaries are shattered. Their presence filled the earth with fear, their cruelty with despair, until the cries of mankind reached the ears of heaven. What makes this story so compelling is not only the terror it describes, but the way it reveals a larger struggle. This is not merely history, nor is it only myth. It is the echo of a cosmic battle that shaped the destiny of mankind. To hear it is to realize that humanity's story has always been entangled with powers greater than itself, that what happened in ages past was not confined to men, but involved angels, giants, and the judgment of God. The fragments of the Book of Giants serve as both a warning and a revelation. They remind us that rebellion, whether angelic or human, carries consequences, and that corruption left unchecked will always demand judgment. Yet they also reveal that God's justice is never absent, that mercy always offers a path, and that even in the darkest chapters of history, His hand works to preserve life and restore balance. If stories like this awaken your curiosity and stir your spirit, I invite you to stay with us on this journey. Subscribe to the channel so you will not miss what comes next. Give this video a like if it has sparked your interest, and leave a comment to share your thoughts. And if you know someone who would be captivated by the mystery of forgotten writings like the Book of Giants, share this video with them. Together, we will uncover truths that were hidden and explore the mysteries of a past that was never meant to be forgotten. The barren cliffs that overlook the Dead Sea conceal secrets older than empires, secrets that remained untouched for nearly 2,000 years until shepherds stumbled upon them in the mid-20th century. The caves of Qumran, silent and unassuming, became the resting place of scrolls that had waited patiently in the darkness, their fragile parchment guarding words that would reshape our understanding of ancient faith and history. Among the fragments found, amidst prayers, prophecies, and laws, appeared a text so unusual that it stood apart. This was the Book of Giants, hidden among writings considered sacred by the community that once dwelled there and yet never welcomed into the canon that shaped the Bible. The discovery itself carries an air of providence, for the scrolls were preserved by conditions so unlikely that their survival seems almost miraculous. Dry desert air, sealed caves, and careful storage kept them intact when countless other writings were lost to fire, flood, or neglect. that such a collection should endure untouched until our age suggests that the wisdom and warnings contained within were destined to be uncovered when humanity was prepared, or perhaps when humanity was most in need of remembrance. To find among them the Book of Giants is not coincidence, but a stirring reminder that truth cannot remain buried forever. Yet one must ask, why would such a book be hidden away? The scribes of Qumran, meticulous in their preservation, did not keep texts without reason. They believed themselves to be guardians of divine knowledge, a community set apart from a world they considered corrupt and unworthy. They copied and preserved writings they deemed vital to the story of God's dealings with mankind. But they also kept other writings, ones that offered context, warning, and revelation. To them, the Book of Giants must have carried weight, yet for the larger body of faith, it was too unsettling to be included among the scriptures read openly in temples and synagogues. The fragments of the Book of Giants are incomplete, torn and fragile, leaving us with only glimpses of a larger narrative. These glimpses are enough to reveal its focus, the account of the Watchers and their offspring, the giants whose presence distorted creation itself. The way the text fits alongside other writings like the Book of Enoch suggests it once formed part of a broader tradition, a record of events remembered and retold by the faithful who sought to understand why judgment came upon the world in ancient times. What we hold today are pieces of a puzzle, jagged fragments that still carry enough detail to shake the soul. The silence that surrounded the book for so many centuries is perhaps the loudest testimony of all. Silence can be deliberate, a shield erected to guard against dangerous truths. When the keepers of faith decided what would remain in the scriptures and what would be left outside, choices were not made lightly. The Book of Giants, with its revelations of angelic rebellion and monstrous offspring, threatened to open doors better left closed. Its words exposed not only human weakness, but celestial failure, and in so doing risked unsettling the faith of those not prepared to hear it. Yet the rediscovery of these manuscripts suggests that humanity cannot forever be shielded from the truth. The questions it raises are not easily dismissed. Why would God allow such beings to walk the earth? Why did the rebellion of the Watchers impact mankind so directly? Why was judgment so severe in the days of Noah? These questions do not undermine faith but deepen it, forcing us to confront the reality of a cosmic struggle that stretches far beyond human sight. When the caves of Qumran gave up their treasures, the world was given an opportunity to look into the shadows of its own history. Among prayers and prophecies that echo with holiness, the fragments of the Book of Giants stand as a stark reminder that not all of creation's story is gentle or comforting. Some truths carry weight, others carry terror. Yet even the terrifying has a place in the story of redemption, for it reveals why God's mercy and justice are both necessary. The very act of preserving the Book of Giants within the scrolls tells us that some were willing to guard knowledge others rejected. It was not erased from existence, nor burned from memory. Instead, it was hidden, preserved, until an appointed time. And now that it has emerged once again, we are left to wrestle with what it reveals, knowing that some chapters of human history were never meant to fade into silence. Long before the floodwaters rose to cleanse the earth, long before mankind's history took the shape we know, an event occurred that changed the destiny of creation forever. It began not with men, but with angels. The Book of Giants recalls the story of the Watchers, celestial beings appointed to watch over humanity, who abandoned their place in the divine order and descended to the earth. Their descent was not an act of mercy, nor was it commanded by God. It was driven by desire, a longing for the daughters of men whose beauty drew them down from heaven into rebellion. This crossing of boundaries was no small act. The Watchers were meant to guide, to guard, to stand as emissaries of divine will. Instead, They chose defiance, stepping outside the harmony of heaven's law. Their descent shattered the balance between the spiritual and the physical. For when angels abandoned their stations and joined themselves to mortal women, a new race was born, one that should never have existed. This was the beginning of the giants, beings who embodied the union of heaven and earth, yet carried none of the holiness of either. The story of their fall has echoes in Genesis 6 verse 2, which speaks of the sons of God seeing the daughters of men and taking them as wives. The Book of Giants expands on this brief verse, showing us the full depth of what occurred. These were not mere unions of love, but acts of defiance that produced consequences far beyond the lives of the individuals involved. It was rebellion clothed in desire, disobedience masked as passion, and its fruit was corruption. The arrival of the Watchers upon the earth was not hidden or small. Imagine the awe of humanity as beings of light and power descended, clothed in forms both radiant and terrible. To mortal eyes, they must have seemed like gods, mighty and irresistible. But what began with fascination quickly descended into ruin. The Watchers taught mankind secrets never meant to be revealed, knowledge that inflamed violence and desire. And their offspring, the giants, brought a weight upon the earth that creation itself could not bear. The rebellion of the Watchers was not simply a story of forbidden love, but of cosmic pride. They stepped beyond the role given to them, desiring not to serve, but to possess, not to guard, but to consume. In their lust for power and beauty, they dragged both heaven and earth into a spiral of destruction. What should have been a paradise became a battlefield, as angelic disobedience planted seeds of corruption that spread quickly among men. The fall of the Watchers is a stark reminder of how far creation can fall when boundaries are ignored. They were not deceived like men, they chose their rebellion knowingly. Their actions demonstrate that even beings of immense wisdom are not immune to pride and desire. The giants that followed them were not simply accidents of nature, but living embodiments of disobedience, symbols of what happens when the divine order is rejected. The descent of the Watchers also reveals why judgment had to come. Without their rebellion, mankind might have stumbled, but not in the same way. It was their actions that accelerated corruption, their defiance that magnified violence, their children that consumed the earth. They set into motion a chain of events that could not be undone by human strength, leaving only one path for restoration: divine intervention. The story of the Watchers is not just about the past. It lingers as a warning, just as they left their proper place, seeking what was never meant for them. So too can mankind be tempted to step beyond the boundaries set for life. In the shining allure of forbidden knowledge, in the hunger for what does not belong, the shadow of their descent still echoes. And the memory of the Watchers reminds us of the cost of rebellion, a cost paid not only by them, but by the entire world. From the union of the Watchers and the daughters of men came offspring unlike anything the earth had ever seen. These giants, towering in stature and terrifying in strength, became the rulers of the land, not by wisdom, but by might. They walked upon the earth as a dreadful reminder of broken boundaries, creatures born of heaven's glory and earth's frailty, yet twisted into forms of corruption. Ancient descriptions of them speak of their size as overwhelming, their appetites unquenchable, and their presence a curse upon humanity. They were not content to live alongside men, but dominated them, enslaved them, and consumed the fruit of their labor. The land could not support them, for their hunger exceeded the bounty of fields and flocks. When the earth could give no more, their appetites turned darker, consuming not only animals, but men themselves. These beings were not merely large men, but something other, something that carried within them the defiance of heaven itself. Their bodies were weapons, their strength unmatched, their rule enforced through terror. To the ordinary man they were untouchable, figures so great in power that resistance seemed impossible. They became the lords of a corrupted age, their violence filling the earth with cries that reached the ears of heaven. The birth of the giants introduced a reign of fear. Humanity no longer tilled the soil in peace or raised families without dread. The shadow of the giants loomed over every settlement, every village, every life. People lived in fear of being consumed, not just in body but in spirit. For the giants represented a world where holiness was mocked, where the divine order was inverted, and where the proud ruled through strength alone. In the Book of Giants, their lives are described as marked by cruelty and arrogance. They laughed at the weakness of men, exalted in their own power, and cared nothing for the balance of creation. They consumed until nothing remained, leaving behind desolation in their path. The memory of these giants lingers in myths across cultures. Titans, ogres, and monstrous beings appear in stories from distant lands, echoes of a reality so overwhelming it carved itself into human memory. Even when the details were lost, the memory of giants endured, carried forward in tales of gods at war, of colossal beings who once walked the earth, and of destruction that followed their presence. Their birth was not a blessing, but a curse, a distortion of creation that carried with it the mark of rebellion. They embodied everything that happens when the natural order is overturned, when boundaries are crossed and desires rule unchecked. Their very existence was a violation, a living testimony of disobedience that could not be ignored. The giants stand as a reminder that corruption does not remain hidden. It grows, it consumes, and it eventually demands judgment. Their lives, though filled with terror and power, were destined to end, for the earth itself could no longer bear their weight. Their reign of fear set the stage for the divine decision to cleanse creation, a decision that would reshape history forever. The Watchers did more than descend and bear children with the daughters of men. They also carried with them knowledge forbidden to humanity, knowledge that should never have left the courts of heaven. To mankind, this knowledge seemed like a gift, but in truth it was a curse. It accelerated corruption, deepened violence, and spread destruction. The Book of Giants speaks of how the Watchers revealed secrets of the heavens, teaching men the arts of warfare, the crafting of weapons, and the forging of tools that could kill rather than build. What had once been a world of survival and community became a battlefield as men learned to raise swords against each other. Violence spread like fire, ignited by the forbidden wisdom handed down by angels who had abandoned their place. They also taught sorcery, incantations, and the manipulation of creation itself. Through these practices, mankind sought to control what was never meant to be controlled. Instead of walking humbly before God, people turned to power that corrupted their hearts and led them into darkness. The secrets of the stars, once a silent testimony to the glory of the Creator, were twisted into astrology, divination, and the search for destiny apart from divine guidance. This hidden knowledge did not enrich humanity, it poisoned it. What seemed like wisdom led to bloodshed. What appeared as progress ended in ruin. The Watchers offered enlightenment, but it was an enlightenment that blinded, filling men with pride and ambition. With every new secret revealed, humanity drifted further from its Creator, sinking into chaos under the weight of knowledge it was never meant to carry. The giants themselves benefited from these secrets, growing stronger in their reign of terror. They learned arts of war beyond the imagination of men, wielded powers that overwhelmed ordinary resistance, and ruled with arrogance fueled by the knowledge their fathers imparted. In their hands, forbidden wisdom became a weapon of oppression, magnifying fear across the land. Even the natural order suffered under this knowledge. The boundaries of creation were twisted as plants and animals were manipulated, corrupted by experiments and alterations that mocked the original design of the Creator. What was meant to reflect beauty became distorted. What was meant to nourish became corrupted. The earth itself groaned under the weight of such violations. The appeal of secret wisdom has always been strong, for it promises power without accountability, knowledge without obedience. Yet the story of the Watchers and the giants reveals the truth about such promises. They lead not to freedom, but to bondage, not to enlightenment, but to darkness. What the Watchers shared was not a gift, but a chain, binding humanity in rebellion against God. Even today, echoes of this hunger for hidden knowledge remain. The temptation to grasp at what is forbidden, to uncover secrets for the sake of power, continues to whisper in the heart of mankind. The story of the Watchers warns that not all wisdom is meant to be known, and not all knowledge brings life. Some truths are deadly, and some revelations are meant to remain in the hands of God alone. The secrets they taught were never forgotten, for the corruption they sowed left an enduring mark. Wars, sorcery, and the pursuit of forbidden wisdom have scarred human history ever since. And though the Watchers themselves face judgment, the legacy of their rebellion remains. Humanity still feels the weight of secrets that were never meant to be revealed, a reminder that not all knowledge is holy, and not every path of enlightenment leads to life. In the midst of this corruption, when the giants walked the earth, and the Watchers reveled in their rebellion, God raised up a man who would stand as both prophet and messenger. His name was Enoch, a figure mentioned briefly in Genesis, but remembered in other ancient writings as one who walked so closely with God that he was taken up, escaping death itself. The Book of Giants places Enoch at the very center of the story, for it was through him that divine judgment was announced to both the fallen angels and their offspring. Enoch was no ordinary man. His life was marked by intimacy with God, a closeness so profound that he became a vessel for visions of heaven itself. While others lived and died, struggling against the violence of the age, Enoch's heart was lifted beyond the corruption of the world. His role was unique, for he became the scribe of heaven, entrusted with words too great for men and messages that carried the authority of the Creator. When the Watchers saw their children, the giants, bringing ruin upon the earth, they grew fearful of the consequences. They knew that their rebellion had not gone unnoticed, and they sought someone to intercede for them. It was to Enoch they turned, pleading that he would carry their petitions before the throne of God. The very beings who had abandoned their place in heaven, who had mocked divine order and corrupted mankind, now trembled before the certainty of judgment. Enoch did not come to them as a friend, nor as a comforter, but as a messenger of truth. His words were not his own, but carried the authority of the one who sent him. He stood before the Watchers and the giants, declaring that their fate was sealed, that forgiveness would not be granted, and that their rebellion had brought destruction not only upon themselves, but upon their children. What they had birthed could not be redeemed, and what they had corrupted would be cleansed. The visions given to Enoch were vast and terrifying. He was shown the structure of heaven, the order of creation, and the destiny of both righteous and wicked. He wrote down these visions, leaving a record of divine justice that extended beyond his time. To the Watchers, his message was clear. They would descend into the depths, bound until the day of judgment, their glory stripped away, their rebellion remembered only as a warning. The giants too heard the words of condemnation. Though they walked with strength and arrogance, they would not escape. Their days were numbered, their reign cut short by the decree of heaven. They were not born of divine purpose, but of rebellion, and so their end would come not by chance, but by judgment. The cries of mankind, the violence that stained the earth, the corruption that twisted creation, all demanded a reckoning. For mankind, the warnings of Enoch were both sobering and reassuring. They revealed that God was not blind to suffering, nor indifferent to corruption. Though the giants seemed invincible, their downfall was certain. Though the Watchers appeared untouchable, their chains awaited them. Enoch's words offered hope to those who longed for justice, reminding them that no rebellion, no matter how powerful, can stand against the eternal order of God. The story of Enoch stands as a testimony that God always raises up a voice, even in the darkest times. When corruption spread and fear ruled the earth, a man walked so closely with God that he became the bridge between heaven's truth and earth's despair. His life reminds us that intimacy with God brings clarity, that walking with Him reveals what is hidden, and that even in an age of giants, a faithful man can carry a message that shakes heaven and earth alike. The giants, though fierce and arrogant, were not without fear. Their immense strength could not shield them from the hand of God, nor could their towering stature prevent the weight of judgment from pressing upon their souls. As their days grew dark, visions began to trouble them. Dreams filled with terror haunted their nights, images of destruction that no power could escape. These dreams revealed what their pride had concealed. Their reign was ending. The Book of Giants describes how these monstrous beings, once confident in their dominance, became restless with fear as nightmares plagued them. They saw images of a great flood, of mountains collapsing, of themselves swept away with no refuge. They saw visions of destruction so absolute that their pride crumbled and their hearts trembled. These were not dreams born of imagination, but divine revelations, warnings from heaven itself. Confused and terrified, the giants sought someone who could explain the meaning of their visions. They turned once again to Enoch, for his closeness with God made him the only one who could interpret what was hidden. Their desperation revealed the truth. Though they towered over men, though they ruled with violence and consumed with unending hunger, they were powerless before the decrees of heaven. Enoch listened to their pleas, but his interpretation did not bring comfort. He told them plainly that their dreams revealed their destruction, that their time of terror was drawing to a close. Their visions of drowning and ruin were not empty fears, but prophecies of what was to come. The earth would no longer bear them, the heavens would no longer tolerate them, and the flood would wipe away their existence. The reaction of the giants to this revelation is telling. Some raged against it, refusing to believe that their power could be broken. Others despaired, knowing deep within that no strength of theirs could resist the hand of God. Their dreams had pierced the veil of arrogance, exposing their mortality and their doom. What once stood as symbols of invincibility now trembled at the thought of divine wrath. The haunting nature of these dreams serves as a reminder that even the most powerful are not beyond the reach of conscience. Though the giants lived in rebellion, though they consumed and destroyed without mercy, they could not escape the whispers of eternity pressing upon their souls. Their dreams revealed what their hearts denied, that judgment comes to all, and no being can stand unshaken when the day of reckoning approaches. These visions also serve as a warning to mankind. Just as the giants were given glimpses of their end, so too does God speak to humanity through warnings, through signs, through the restless stirrings of the heart. To ignore them is to walk blindly into destruction, but to heed them is to prepare the soul for deliverance. The dreams of the giants remind us that even the mighty are subject to truth, and even the arrogant cannot silence the voice of God. The tragedy of the giants lies not only in their existence, but in their awareness of their fate. They saw the end approaching, they felt the fear of judgment, and yet their hearts did not turn to repentance. Pride kept them bound, arrogance blinded them to hope, and so their dreams became a prophecy fulfilled in despair. They remind us that knowledge without humility leads only to ruin, and that visions, no matter how clear, cannot save a soul unwilling to bow before God. The corruption of the watchers, the violence of the giants, and the spread of forbidden knowledge had pushed creation to its breaking point. The cries of mankind rose to heaven, the blood of the innocent stained the earth, and the balance of life was shattered. In response, God decreed an act so vast and final that it would cleanse the world of its corruption. This act was the Great Flood. a catastrophe remembered in the scriptures, echoed in the Book of Giants, and preserved in the traditions of countless cultures across the earth. The flood was not a random disaster, but a deliberate judgment. Genesis 6 verse 5 speaks of how every inclination of the thoughts of men's hearts was only evil continually, and how the earth was filled with violence. This corruption was not simply human in origin, it was fueled by the rebellion of the Watchers and the destruction wrought by their children. To preserve creation, the corrupted line had to be wiped away and a remnant had to be saved. Noah, described as righteous and blameless in his generation, became the vessel of this preservation. While others followed paths of violence and corruption, he walked with God, echoing the faithfulness once seen in Enoch. Through him, the line of humanity would continue, cleansed of the corruption that threatened to overwhelm it. The ark he built was not only a structure of wood, but a symbol of divine mercy, a refuge in the midst of judgment. For the giants, the flood meant extinction. Their size, their strength, their arrogance could not protect them from the waters that rose above mountains and swallowed valleys. The very earth they had consumed turned against them, drowning their reign in waves of divine justice. Their cries, once filled with laughter and cruelty, were silenced beneath the waters, their memories sealed in the depths. The Watchers, too, faced judgment. Bound and cast into the abyss, they awaited a final reckoning. Their rebellion was not forgotten, their crimes not erased. While their children perished in the flood, their spirits lingered under chains, reminders that no rebellion against God ends in victory. The flood marked their downfall, sealing their fate until the day when all creation will stand in judgment. For mankind, the flood was both tragedy and mercy. It swept away a world consumed by violence, but it also provided a new beginning. The cleansing waters destroyed the corruption of the giants, but they also preserved a remnant through which God's purposes would continue. What seemed like destruction was, in truth, an act of love, a resetting of creation to restore the balance shattered by rebellion. The flood remains one of the most profound reminders of divine justice. It reveals that God's patience has limits, that corruption cannot endure forever, and that mercy is always offered before judgment comes. Noah's Ark stood open as a place of refuge, but only those who entered found salvation. In the same way, every generation is given a chance to turn, a moment to seek refuge in God's mercy before judgment falls. The story of the flood also explains why the Book of Giants was so dangerous. It revealed the deeper reasons behind the flood, the cosmic rebellion that made such judgment necessary. To acknowledge the giants and the Watchers is to confront the reality that human history is shaped not only by men, but by forces greater than themselves. And to remember the flood is to remember that God alone holds the authority to cleanse and to restore. Though the giants perished in the flood, their memory did not vanish. Across cultures and civilizations, tales of enormous beings, godlike rulers, and monstrous enemies have endured. These echoes serve as fragments of a forgotten reality, scattered across the earth, preserved in myth, legend, and tradition. When read together, they paint a striking picture. The memory of the giants is not confined to one people or one land, but stretches across humanity. In Greek mythology, the Titans stand as colossal beings who once ruled before being cast down by the Olympian gods. Their rebellion, their size, and their downfall bear striking resemblance to the Watchers and their offspring. The War of the Titans, remembered as a clash between heaven and earth, mirrors the cosmic rebellion described in the Book of Giants. Among the Sumerians, stories of the Anunnaki recall beings from the heavens who ruled over men, imparting knowledge and power. Their role as bringers of wisdom and rulers from above reflects the same themes found in the Watchers, who descended with forbidden secrets that altered the course of mankind. In Norse tradition, the Jotun are depicted as giants of great strength, often at war with the gods. Their existence as beings of chaos, threatening the order of creation, parallels the giants of the ancient texts who consumed and destroyed until balance was lost. The final battle of Ragnarok, in which these giants faced destruction, echoes the theme of inevitable judgment. Even among Native American legends, stories persist of great beings, taller than men, who once roamed the land and brought fear. In some accounts, these giants were cannibals, preying upon humanity, much like the descriptions of the giants in the Book of Giants. These traditions, passed down through generations, preserve the memory of a time when such beings walked the earth. The persistence of these stories across so many cultures suggests they are not mere invention, but distorted memories of real events. Each culture may have told the story in its own language, shaped by its own traditions, but the underlying theme remains the same. There was a time when beings greater than men ruled with terror, and their downfall came with divine intervention. The echoes of giants in myth and history remind us that the flood may have destroyed their bodies, but it did not erase their memory. Humanity remembered them, told stories of them, and preserved fragments of their existence in ways that still survive today. To dismiss these stories as mere fables is to ignore the possibility that they are witnesses to a forgotten reality. The convergence of these traditions points back to the truth preserved in the Book of Giants. What was written in fragments at Qumran is echoed in myths across the earth, each telling in its own way the same haunting story of beings born of heaven and earth, who brought corruption and who faced destruction. These echoes remind us that history is larger than what we see in Scripture alone. While the Bible gives us the foundation, other cultures preserve pieces of the same story, distorted perhaps, but pointing to the same truth. Together, they form a chorus of testimony that giants once walked the earth, and their shadow still lingers in human memory. The fragments of the Book of Giants whisper of a truth that was never meant to be heard by every ear. For generations, its words were hidden, sealed in the caves of Qumran, forgotten beneath the dust of centuries. When one asks why this book was left outside the canon of Scripture, why its memory was almost erased, the answer becomes clear. Its revelations were too dangerous. The story it tells does not simply recount the deeds of men, but exposes the rebellion of angels, the corruption of creation, and the shadow of forces that shaped humanity's earliest history. To reveal such truths openly would be to confront questions that unsettle the foundations of faith. The suppression of the Book of Giants reflects a fear that knowledge can overwhelm the unprepared. To hear that angels once defied the Creator, that their children ruled as monsters upon the earth, and that judgment came in the form of a flood, is to face a reality far more complex than simple tales of good and evil. It reveals a cosmic struggle that stretches beyond the reach of human understanding, a struggle in which mankind is caught, often unaware. To guard against confusion, the keepers of tradition chose silence, shielding generations from knowledge that could burden the soul. Yet silence does not erase truth. The very survival of this book among the Dead Sea Scrolls is proof that some believed the story should not be forgotten. They understood that what is hidden in darkness eventually comes to light. To uncover the Book of Giants today is to rediscover what was concealed, to look upon the shadow of history, and to realize that humanity has always been part of a battle greater than itself. The danger of such knowledge lies in its power to challenge the way people see the world. If giants truly walked the earth, if angels truly fell and mingled with mankind, then history is not as simple as we often believe. The flood becomes not only an act of judgment against human wickedness, but against cosmic rebellion. Myths from every culture become not mere fantasy, but distorted memories of a forgotten reality. And the story of salvation itself gains new depth, for it is not only mankind that fell, but the very heavens that trembled. The Book of Giants was never meant to flatter humanity with comforting words. It was meant to shake, to warn, and to reveal that the line between obedience and rebellion is fragile. It reminds us that no power, whether angelic or human, can stand against the decrees of God. And it warns us that knowledge pursued apart from Him leads not to wisdom, but to ruin. The scribes who hid it understood the weight of its message, perhaps fearing that such truth, once known, could tempt mankind into chasing the same forbidden wisdom that destroyed the Watchers. Yet in our time, its rediscovery serves a different purpose. It calls us to remember that evil is real, that rebellion has consequences, and that judgment is not an empty threat. The giants, for all their strength, perished. The Watchers, for all their glory, were bound. Humanity itself, though corrupted, was given mercy through Noah. The Book of Giants stands as a testament that God's justice prevails, no matter how powerful the forces of corruption may seem. Perhaps that is why you were not supposed to know, because to know is to carry responsibility. To be aware of the giants is to recognize the depth of humanity's struggle. To remember the Watchers is to understand that even the most glorious can fall. To face the flood is to admit that judgment comes when corruption goes unchecked. And to hold these truths in your heart is to choose whether to live in the light of God's order or in the shadow of rebellion. The Book of Giants, though fragmented and incomplete, echoes across time to remind us that we stand in the midst of a battle far older than ourselves. It is a battle between light and darkness, obedience and pride, mercy and corruption. The knowledge it carries was suppressed because it confronts us with that reality, a reality that shakes illusions and demands a choice. To read it is to stand at the threshold of hidden truth, a truth that will not leave you unchanged. You have now journeyed through a story that was never meant to be told, a story of angels who fell, giants who ruled, and judgment that reshaped the earth. The Book of Giants pulls back the veil of history, reminding us that humanity's path has always been entangled with forces greater than itself. It challenges us to see the world not only as it appears, but as it truly is, alive with a struggle between obedience and rebellion, light and darkness. If this message has stirred your heart, I encourage you to stay connected with this journey. Subscribe to the channel so you will not miss what is yet to come. Like this video if it has spoken to you, for each gesture of support helps spread these truths further. Leave a comment to share your thoughts, reflections, or questions, for every voice adds to the conversation. And most importantly, share this video with those close to you so that they too may discover the story that was once hidden, the story that reveals a truth too powerful to remain forgotten.